So, going ahead with Chapter 13 of The Once and Future King by T.H. White. The summer was over at last, and nobody could deny any longer that autumn was definitely there. It was a rather sad time of year, when for the first time for many months the fine old sun still blazes away in a cloudless sky, but does not warm you, and the hoar frost and the mists and the winds begin to stir their faint limbs at morning and evening, with the gossamer, as sap of winter vigor remembers itself in the cold corpses which brave summer slew. The leaves were still on the trees and still green, but it was the leaden green of old leaves, which have seen much since the gay colors and happiness of spring, that seemed so lately, and like all happy things, so quickly to have passed. The sheep fairs had been held, the plums had tumbled off the trees in the first big winds, and here and there, in the lovely sunlight, too, soon enfeebled a branch of beech or oak was turning yellow, the one to die quickly and mercifully, the other perhaps to hold grimly to the frozen tree, and to hiss with its papery skeletons all through the east winds of winter until the spring was there again. The wart's arm did not hurt any more, but he was not allowed to do his martial exercises. He was not allowed to do his martial exercises under the sergeant-at-arms in the afternoon, for fear of spoiling it before it was properly mended. He went for walks instead, kept watch on a playful family of 5 hobbies who shouted, "Quee, quee, 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 quee," and would be migrating any day now. They were late already, and he collected the enormous caterpillars of moths which had been through their changes and now sought lumberingly for a convenient place in which to turn into a chrysalis. His best captive was a 4-inch plum and apricot upholstery of a goat moth, which buried itself quite cheerfully among the trails of silk in a box of loose earth which he kept beside his bed. It had taken 3 years to reach his present size, and would lie perdue for another, before the big dun moth crept out of its old armor and pumped the blood into the veins of its endless wings, of its expanding wings. Merlin had caught a male grass snake on one of these walks. They met by chance, face to face, as each was turning the corner of a big bed of seeded nettles from opposite directions, and the magician pounced upon the reptile before it had time to flick its black tongue twice. He held it up, wriggling and hissing and smelling strongly of acetylene, while the wart exclaimed in horror. "Don't be afraid of it," said Merlin. "It's only a piece of olive lightning with an oak of V behind its shining black head. It can't sting you and won't bite you. It has never done harm to anybody, and can only flee and stink. See?" he said, and began stroking it from the head downwards, a touch which the poor creature tried to evade, but soon accepted in its ceaseless efforts to pour away. "Everybody kills them," said Merlin indignantly. "Some by Our Lady fool once said that you can tell an adder because it had a V on its head, which stood for viper. It would take you 5 minutes to find the mark on an adder's head anyway. But these helpless beauties with their bright yellow, black-bordered V get bashed to death in consequence. Here, catch hold of him." The wart took the serpent gingerly in his hands, taking care to hold it well away from the vent from which the white smell came. He had thought that snakes were slimy as well as dangerous, but this was not. It was as dry as a piece of living rope, and had, like rope, a pleasant texture to the fingers on account of its scales. Every ounce of it was muscle. Every plate of its belly was a strong and moving foot. He had held toads before, and they, the fat, philosophical, wordy creatures, had been a little clammy on account of their loose flesh. This creature, on the other hand, was dry and delicately rough, and liquid power. It was the same temperature as the ground on which it basked. "You asked to be turned into a snake once," said Merlin. "Do you still want that?" "Yes, please. It isn't much of a life. I don't think you'll get anything very exciting to happen to you. This chap probably only eats about once a week or once a fortnight, and the rest of the time he dreams. Still, if I turned you into one, you might get him to talk. It won't be more than that." "I should like it all the same." "Well, it will be a rest after shooting griffins." Merlin loosed the grass snake, which immediately flashed off into the nettles. Then he exchanged a few words in Greek, and with an invisible gentleman called Aesculapius, and turned to the wart. He said, "I shall stay here for an hour or two, and perhaps I shall sit down against that tree and have a nap. Then I want you to come out to me when I call you. Goodbye." The wart tried to say goodbye, but found that he was dumb. He looked quickly at his hands, but they were not there. Aesculapius had accepted him so gently that he had not noticed it, and was lying on the ground. "Pour off, then," said Merlin. "Go and search for him in the nettles." Some people say that snakes are deaf, and others that they deafen themselves in order to escape being charmed by music. The thoughtful adder, for instance, is said by many learned persons to lay one ear upon the ground and to stick the point of his tail into the other so that he cannot hear your music. Wart found that, as a matter of fact, snakes were not deaf. He had an ear anyway, which was conscious of deep roaring sounds. He had an ear anyway, which was conscious of deep roaring sounds that were approximate to the noises which he had learned as a boy. For instance, if somebody bangs on the side of the bath, or if the pipes begin to gurgle when your ears are underwater, you hear sounds which are different from those which you would hear in a normal position. But you would soon get accustomed to these sounds, and connect the roaring and bubbling with the water pipes, if you kept your head under water for long. In fact, although you heard a different kind of noise, you would still be hearing the pipes which human beings hear in the upper air. So the wart could hear what Merlin said, though it sounded very thin and high, and he therefore hoped to be able to talk to the snake. He darted out his tongue, which he used as a sort of feeler, such as a long stick which an explorer might probe the bogs in front of him, and he slid off into the nettles in search of his companion. The other snake was lying flat on its face in a state of great agitation. It had managed to push itself into the very roots of the coarse grass among the nettles, for there is always a kind of empty layer between the green grass and the actual mud. The top green layer is supported on pillars of bleached roots, and it was in this secret, acre-huge chamber, which covered every grass field, floored with mud and roofed with green, that the poor snake had sought concealment. It was lamenting to itself in a very sweet, cold, simple voice, crying, "Alas! Alas!" It was difficult to explain the way in which snakes talk, except by this. Everybody knows that there are rays of light, the infrared and the ultraviolet and those beyond them, in which ants, for instance, can see and men cannot. Just so there are waves of sound higher than a bat's squeak, which Mozart once heard delivered by Lucrezia Agregari in 1770, and lower than a distant thunder which pheasants hear, or is it that they see the flash before man? It was in these profound melodious accents which the snake conversed. "Who are you?" asked the snake, trembling, as Wart poured himself into the secret chamber beside it. "Did you see that human? It was an H. sapiens, I believe. I only just got away." It was in such a flutter that it did not wait for its question to be answered, but went on excitedly. "Oh, the horrid creature! Did you notice how it smelt? Well, I shan't go out again in a hurry. That I will say. Look what a mess I have got myself in. It was an H. sapiens barbatus, as far as I could see. They are quite common round here. You take my advice and lie close for a day or two. I just went out for a moment with the idea of getting a frog or two before hibernating, and it pounced upon me like a hedgehog. I don't believe I was ever so frightened in my life. Do you think it would be best to hibernate at once?" "I shouldn't worry," said the wart. "That particular human is fond of snakes, as I happen to know." "To eat?" stammered the serpent. "No, no. He is friendly with them. He has some as pets. That is, he spends most of the botany hours looking for frogs to feed them on. It's wonderful how few frogs there are once you begin looking for them. Only toads, of course, and snakes don't eat toads." "I ate a toad once," said the other, who was beginning to calm down. "It was a small one, you know, but it wasn't very nice. Still, I don't think I should like to be a pet of that creature's, however many frogs it caught. Do you happen to know its sex?" "It was a male," said the wart. "H. sapiens, Barbatus, and here the book shows us the male symbol, repeated the snake, feeling safer now that he had got the subject clarified. And what is your name, my child? The wart did not know what to answer, so he simply told the truth. It's a funny sort of name, said the snake doubtfully. What is yours? Asked the wart. T. Natrix. What does the T stand for anything? Well, not Tommy, said the snake rather coolly, if that's what you mean. It's Tropodonitus, in my family always. I'm sorry. If you don't mind my saying so, remarked the snake, it seems to me that your education has been neglected. First you have a mother who calls you Wart, just as if you were one of those vulgar bona fide. And then you can't distinguish a T-Natrix when you see him. Did you never have a mother? As a matter of fact, I didn't. Oh, I am sorry, exclaimed the snake. I hope I haven't hurt your feelings. Do you mean to say that you never had anybody teach you about the legends and dreams and that? Never, you poor newt. What do you do when you hibernate? I suppose I just go to sleep and not dream. No, said the wart, I don't think so, not much. It turned out that T-Natrix was an affectionate and tender-hearted creature, for now it shed a small clear tear through its nose and exclaimed indignantly, What a shame! Fancy the poor little reptile crawling into its lonely hole for all those months with not a mother to remember and not a single dream to keep it company. I suppose they haven't even taught you history. I know some history, said the wart doubtfully, about Alexander the Great and that. Some trashy modern stuff, no doubt, said the snake. How in earth did you get through the winter, I don't know. Did anybody tell you about Atlantosaurus, Imantis, or Ceratosaurus, Nasticornus? I don't think so. Well, I don't know what to say. Couldn't you tell me about them yourself? It certainly seems the kindest thing to do, replied the snake. And by Aesculapius, I will do it too, if it takes me all the afternoon. Why, I should hardly be able to sleep the whole winter, thinking of you shivering in that hole with nothing to muse about. It would be very kind of you if you would. And I will, said the gentle reptile. I will teach you the sort of thing that all snakes revolve in their small, slow winter brains. What time the snow shuffles down outside, or for that matter in the summer too, as they snooze beside warm stones, would you rather have history or legends? I think history, said the wart. History, murmured the snake, drawing a film over its eyes because it could not close them. History, it repeated softly. Ah, I wonder, said the snake after a moment. Then it gave a gentle sigh and gave up. You must forget about us, it said absently. There is no history in me or you. We are individuals too small for our great sea to care for. That is why I don't have any special name, but only T-Natrix, like all my forefathers before me. There is a little history in T-Natrix, but none in me. It stopped, baffled by its own feelings, and then began again in its slow voice. There is one thing which all we snakes remember, child, except for two people. We are the oldest in the world. Look at that ridiculous H. sapiens barbatus which gave me such a fright just now. It was born when? 10 or 20,000 years ago? What do the 10s and 20s matter? The earth cooled, the sea covered it. It was 100 million years ago that life came to the great sea, and the fishes bred within it. They were the oldest people, the fish. Their children climbed out of it and stood upon the bosky shores, and they were the amphibii. Like our friends the newts, the third people who sprang from them were the reptiles, of which we are one. Think of those old faces, of the world upon which T-Natrix moved in the slime, and the millions of years. Why, the birds which you see every day are our descendants. We are their parents, but can persist to live among them.